Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Art of Landscape Photography with me, Joshua Snow. And on today's episode, I compare Photoshop's focus stacking ability head to head with Helicon Focus, the new industry standard for focus stacking images. And I'll show you how to fix some of the things that come up with each of the different methods. So if you've ever wondered which one's better or why to use either one of them, stay tuned and we'll get right into it. Today's video is all about comparing Photoshop's focus stacking ability against Helicon Focus, a third-party focus stacking software, I believe originally designed more for macro photography, but obviously it has some landscape uses, and it's kind of become the industry standard. But should it be? I'm not so sure. Sometimes it does an amazing job, other times Photoshop seems to do a better job. Today we're going to compare the three different rendering methods in Helicon Focus against Photoshop's tried and true auto blend mode. So, without further ado, we're going to take this beautiful image I captured recently in Colorado and we're going to run it through the paces in Photoshop and Helicon Focus. Now I've already done some basic adjustments to this, purely Lightroom adjustments, just a little bit of masking, some contrast, and a few global adjustments. So it really should have no issue with the focus stack. Now if we cycle through these, you'll see that there is some movement between these three files, mainly between the first one, the second one. Now, I'm going to show you some tricks on how we can deal with that after, but this is the perfect example to illustrate why Photoshop and Helicon Focus don't always do the perfect job. So we're going to go ahead and export these, edit in as layers in Photoshop. Once those images have opened over in Photoshop, we're going to select all three layers. We're then going to go up to Edit, Auto Align. This part is critical because there is going to be some focus breathing between all of the shots. If you have more shots, there's going to be more focus breathing stacking up at the end, so you're going to end up with a slight border around the image, and you'll kind of see what that looks like here once we finish. We're going to make sure that we select Auto, and not really too worried about this stuff since you most likely did that in Lightroom or your raw converter. We're going to go ahead and hit OK, and it's going to do its job. Alright, so you could see a small shift there, and if we cycle through these, you might notice that there's a border. This is from the focus breathing, and so to bring this up, it's always a really good idea to shoot a little bit wider than you plan the finished image to be, because you're going to have to crop off some of this so you can get rid of that. So we're going to go ahead and reactivate those three layers. While all three of them are selected, we're going to go ahead and hit Command or Control G to put those in a group. You can also click the little folder icon down here. Now the next thing we're going to do is click Command or Control and J. Now that's going to duplicate that group for us. We're going to label this one Recovery. We're going to label this one Stack, because sometimes we end up with mistakes, and that's the point of today's video. And this group here is how we fix some of those mistakes. So we're just going to go ahead and open up this group. We're going to reselect those three layers, go back to Edit, and this time we're going to choose Auto Blend Layers, and we're going to choose Stack Images because we're not stitching a panorama. And these two boxes here, I'm going to leave it up to you whether or not you use those. Like I explained a minute ago, this Content Aware Fill Transparent Areas is going to try to fill that transparent border with pixels. They're going to be blurry anyway, so I'll leave that up to you. The Seamless Tones and Colors is if there is any variation between the exposures of these focus stacked layers, it'll try to fix those while it's blending so that everything is nice and seamless. I'll leave that up to you as well. I tend to just leave them on, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. Alright, so if we toggle this group on and off, you'll see there's been some movement, and that's just because there is movement in those flowers. I was using a fast enough shutter speed to freeze motion, but no matter what, there is always a level of patience involved where you just have to wait for the wind to stop in order for those flowers to be perfectly aligned in each frame. Because if they're in half in focus in one frame and half in focus in the next frame, but they're in two different positions, they're never going to blend together. So that's important to think about. It is one thing that comes up a lot when I'm teaching wildflower workshops is that, can't we just use a fast shutter speed? Well, yeah, that's part of the problem, but the other part is patience and just waiting for those flowers to be completely still. And sometimes it's very hard to do, but in order to get a really good blend, you unfortunately have to have some patience. It always pays to have multiple focus stacks so that maybe you can combine a couple of them to get all of the flowers in focus if you run into the situations that we're running into today. So let's go ahead and zoom in to 100% here, and we're going to focus on the flowers here on the left part of the screen here. We're going to take a look at this paintbrush. Now we're going to turn this layer off. This is the blended merged layer here, and these are the three layers that it masked to combine. Now if I highlight those masks, you'll see there's some weird stuff going on. Let's take a look at that at 100% full screen there. Now that doesn't really make any sense, right? Because as we move through the scene, you would expect the focus point to have something to do with how these masks are made. And when we look at them, we really don't see that. Maybe we do here and here, where the foreground is mostly masked out in this one, but it's mostly masked in this one. But there's weird blotches up here that would be the mountains in both of these masks. And there's also this third image where kind of just a dappled amount of the background here is being allowed through. So this doesn't really make any sense in how it's combining these three images to come up with a clean focus stack. But when we look at it really close, it's very hard to see. Got a bird flying through the air, must be, or something moving there, an insect. But it's very difficult to see those really strange, anomalous masking spots. And that's probably because there's a fair amount of overlap between these three frames in terms of focus. But yeah, I'm really not seeing any major issues on the background despite what those masks look like. Now, one place that is notorious, no matter whether you're using Photoshop or Helicon Focus, is that horizon. I always check the horizon. And I'll tell you, Photoshop usually does a better job with horizons than Helicon Focus. But that's not to say that it is better, because you can still see there are issues all over the place here where it didn't quite blend well. So what we're going to do is we're going to hop on over to Helicon Focus before we do anything else, and we're just going to compare one of the methods, all of the methods, and see how those compare to Photoshop. So instead of right clicking and being able to just edit as layers in Helicon Focus, we have to export these. And depending on which version of Helicon Focus you have, over on heliconsoft.com, you can see that they offer three different packages. The light package, where the 1-year license is $30, the Focus Pro package with a 1-year license of $55, and the premium package, which has a 1-year license for $65. All of these come with unlimited lifetime licenses if you choose to pay a little bit extra. But we're going to take a look and see what the difference is between these three. All three of these packages will do just fine. But if you are the type of person that wants to work in raw files, unfortunately, you only have two options. You have to either go with the Pro package or the Premium package, where you can save as a DNG. You can come into the program as a raw file and out as a DNG. I've always just used TIFF files and it works great. Let's get back to the video. I've always had a little bit of weird conversion issues with blacks and colors going from Lightroom to Helicon Focus. And so even though I have the lifetime membership, I like to use TIFF files from Lightroom. And so I've already done some editing to these images. I want to make sure I keep those edits. I'm going to export these photos as TIFFs. I want to make sure that I've chosen 16-bit depth here to make sure that I get the maximum amount of detail out of the images. I'm not going to resize, I'm not going to sharpen, I don't care about any of these other things other than the file settings, where I've saved it, and what we're doing after. And in this case I have it opening Helicon Focus for us. So we're going to go ahead and just click export. Once those files have opened up over here in Helicon Focus, you will notice that on the right hand side, well, firstly, it looks very much different than Photoshop, but don't be intimidated by that. It's very simple, very easy to use, and there's great informative tutorials in all of the places that you might get confused, specifically here in the rendering method. We have 3 different methods to choose from. Photoshop only has one, so surely one of these methods should be the right one for the image. That should be better than Photoshop, right? Well, let's try. Firstly, what do these 3 methods do and how are they different? What's nice is if you click on this little question mark here, it'll take you to their website where you can scroll down and see the difference between the rendering methods here. Now, if we focus in on method A, it says that it computes the weight for each pixel based on its contrast and then forms the weighted average of all pixels from all source images. This method works better for short stacks and preserves contrast and color. Method B selects the source image containing the sharpest pixel and uses this information to form the depth map. This method imposes strict requirements on the order of images. It should always be consecutive. Perfectly renders textures on smooth surfaces. Does it do it perfectly? I'm not so sure. Method C says it uses pyramid approach to image processing, dividing image signals into high and low frequency. It gives you good results in complex cases, intersecting objects, deep stacks, though increases contrast and glare. Now, notice that it's manipulating contrast. This makes me wonder if this has something to do with the issues that I've always had with it. But in my experience, method B seems to work really great for landscapes. In rare cases, I've had to use method C for really complex scenes, and I suspect that maybe that's the right one for this image since there's a lot of texture and intersecting lines in the foreground. So let's go ahead and click method A just so that we can see the comparison between all the different rendering methods and compare them. Okay, I can see right away if we zoom into 100% and we look at the same flower that we were looking at in Photoshop that we're having similar issues. We've got some strange stuff going on here because those flowers are just not in the same position. And this is just to prove that no matter what you do, you have to wait for those flowers to stop moving because there isn't a software that will actually align those things perfectly. So that's just really important to consider. But both Helicon Focus and Photoshop have the ability to fix or overcome these issues. But if you don't want to have to deal with that and you just want a perfect stack every time, there is no substitute for patience. And so if we look around a little bit more, we can see there's anomalies everywhere. There's misalignments and ghosting all over the place, and that is really not what we want. So let's go ahead and try method B, and we will re-render the same 3 images and see how this one goes. You can see that one built a depth map. It analyzed the image and it slowly built up the sharpness. So maybe this will have a better result. Let's zoom in to 100% and let's go look at that same flower. Slightly better result, not as much ghosting, but there's still some ghosting there. And we see on this daisy back here about the same amount as we did in the method A rendering. So jury is still out. Like I said, I suspect that method C might be the better option. Let's give that a try. Let's go ahead and zoom in again to 100% and find our paintbrush. Okay, I'm going to say that that's a slightly better result. It's done a better job blending the flower together, even though it is misaligned, but that is still a little bit too much to be okay with. And we can see that there's also some ghosting remaining on this daisy back here. One thing that I didn't really compare or even show is the weird stuff that can happen with horizons and Helicon Focus. Now, you can see this edge is really sharp, whereas this edge is not as sharp. And you can see there's a little bit of ghosting here. If we zoom in, you can see there's a little bit of ghosting. It's really sharp over here. But if we go back and check on rendering method B, you can see a different result. You can see more ghosting here, more ghosting here, and more ghosting here. Let's check method A. About the same as method B. A lot of ghosting here, here, and in this area here. And that's just looking at a very small part of the horizon. So if we extrapolate that, chances are it's happening in other places too. But when we go back to Photoshop, we don't really see the same issues when we look in those same areas. It's very clean, very sharp. Of course, we still have the same issues with the flowers. So, which one's better? Photoshop's doing a better job in this case. Now, that's not to say that it did a perfect job with blending colors or dealing with the focus breathing or doing a better job aligning the flowers. But just based on the horizon line itself, I'm going to go with Photoshop on this one. Now, if we go back to Helicon Focus, I think we need to go ahead and take a look at the focus breathing and how it deals with it. Now, in Photoshop, we could see that there was some focus breathing, and if we go ahead and take a look, you can see it just kind of fills it in with a blurry border. It's all the way around the image. Helicon Focus, it mainly just crops it off, which is something that you're going to do most likely in Photoshop anyway. Now, the big difference here is how we retouch those Arrhenius things. So in Photoshop, if we collapse this stack, we're going to take this recovery stack and select it and drag it up above the focus stack, the rendered image here. Now we're going to go ahead and open that and turn all of these off. And we're going to go through these flowers one at a time. We're going to start with this paintbrush. Also, let me just say, Photoshop did a much better job with this daisy behind the paintbrush. So if that's any consolation, I'm still leaning toward Photoshop. Now we need to fix this paintbrush. So what we need to do is now turn on each one of these layers until we find the one that paintbrush is the sharpest. Now none of them are perfectly sharp, but we have one here that's particularly better than the others. So what we're going to do is activate that layer, and then we're going to go ahead and put a black mask on it, switch to a brush tool with white as our foreground color. We're going to change our opacity to 100%, and we are going to begin painting this flower in. And you have to kind of be careful because there are things around it that may or may not be on the same focus plane, and they may or may not be in the same position. And so as you paint or recover one of these areas, you might reveal an issue in another area. So it pays to be precise, and it pays to be a little bit careful. And you can see just like that, we've managed to fix that really bad ghosting. And we would just go around the whole image and we would find whatever flower was having the most issues in that layer, in that focal plane, and we would fix those. And if we find another flower that is ahead of or behind that focal plane or that layer, then we would need to switch to a different layer. But you can see Photoshop did a pretty darn good job here. We've got a little bit of an error here. Let's just see, I believe that's on the same layer. We can go ahead and just fix that while we're here. I'm seeing a little bit of an error here. We can just fix that as well. And we've got an error here, but maybe that's on a different layer. So let's go ahead and take a look at these different layers. But no, I believe it's on that same layer. So while we're here, we can fix this as well. Okay. Now that is how we would fix those issues in Photoshop. And from there, we could collapse those and create a stamp visible Command Option Shift and E or Control Alt Shift E, and we have a whole compiled layer here that we can then go do our retouching on and begin our other edits with. You could also completely merge the layers, getting rid of the underlying groups. Otherwise, that's it, and you can move on. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the retouching in Helicon Focus, because it's a little bit different, and I'm gonna say a lot more straightforward and easy to use, but you might be fixing more issues by using Helicon Focus. So let's go ahead and start with the same flower. All right, let's hop over here to the retouching tab. And we have to do a similar thing. We need to find the layer that flower is the most in focus and closest to the position that it is in the final image here. And so it looks like it's this one again. And we can take our brush using our bracket keys. We can make it bigger or smaller. And on the right hand side, you have brush hardness, color tolerance, brightness, and stuff like that. So the nice thing about this is that you have a hardness factor, just like Photoshop, where you can be really precise with what you're blending in. But you don't have to move any layers around, you don't have to make any groups. This is just a little bit more straightforward. The process is going to be the same though. We're just simply going to paint in this flower, recovering it, fixing it, and making it look nice and sharp. Now we know we have some flowers over here that also got a little bit messed up, and some flowers behind it. We can go ahead and fix a bunch of these flowers that are in this area. And of course we need to go ahead and do the same for that horizon, because we don't want to have this weird choppy horizon. So we need to pick the layer where that horizon is most in focus and then paint over the horizon. As I go through this, the more errors I see, and I know that I'm using method A, but the process will be the same for the other rendering methods as well. You can even fix things like this bird or insect that was in the sky while you're there. Once you've finished that, you would simply go to save, and you would save it to your destination. Now notice when we're out here at 100% full screen, the darks look an awful lot darker than what's over here in Photoshop and what we had in Lightroom. I believe that has to do with the rendering methods, but as I click through these different rendering methods, there's not a substantial difference. And so that is the comparison, direct head-to-head with a complex image in both Photoshop and Helicon Focus. And I'm honestly still on the fence with which one's better. Each one has their pros and cons. In this case, I think Photoshop did a better job. How? Why? I'm not sure, but it did. There were less errors, there were less ghosting. I find that once you get used to the process of focus stacking and blending in Photoshop, that process is just as easy as the interface here in Helicon Focus. And with that, I really don't have much else to say. I'm going to leave it up to you guys to decide which one you prefer. I will put these 3 images in the description so you can download them and try this yourself. And with that, I will see you guys on the next video. I hope you guys really enjoyed that video. We got to see the ins and outs of focus stacking between the 2 different methods, Photoshop versus Helicon Focus, directly head to head. And I hope it answered some questions for you. If you wouldn't mind, please like, subscribe, and share this with your community. And I'll see you guys on the next one.